Rome, 44 BC, middle of the night. Porcia Cato sat alone in her chamber, a razor-sharp dagger in her trembling hand. Her husband Brutus was at another secret meeting, the third one this week. He wouldn't tell her what was happening, wouldn't look her in the eye, kept saying, "It's nothing, don't worry yourself." But Porcia wasn't stupid. She was Cato the Younger's daughter. She'd grown up watching her father face down tyrants and choose death over dishonor. She knew what conspiracy looked like. She knew what fear smelled like. And she knew her husband was planning something that could get him killed. The dagger felt cold against her palm. She pressed the blade against her thigh, just above the knee. Her hand shook, not from fear of pain, from fury that it had come to this, one quick motion. Blood soaked through her dress, pooling on the marble floor. She didn't scream, didn't cry out, just wrapped the wound and waited for morning, when she would show her husband exactly what she was made of. You're probably wondering, why would anyone do this? What kind of person stabs themselves to make a point? Let me tell you about the most dangerous woman in Rome. If you want to understand Porcia, you need to understand her father. Cato the Younger wasn't just any Roman senator. He was the man who stood up to Julius Caesar when everyone else was kissing his feet. The man who walked barefoot through Rome to protest corruption. The man who, when Caesar finally won the Civil War, chose to kill himself rather than live under tyranny. Porcia was 13 when her father died, old enough to understand what he'd done, old enough to remember his last words to her. Never compromise your principles, not for comfort, not for safety, not for love. She watched her mother weep, watched Rome celebrate Caesar's victory, watched everyone forget that her father had been right about everything, and she made herself a promise. She would never be weak. She would never be ignored. She would never let anyone treat her like she didn't matter just because she was a woman. Growing up in Cato's house meant growing up with Stoic philosophy, not the watered-down version people quote at parties, the real thing, the brutal, uncompromising truth. You can't control what happens to you. You can only control how you respond. Your character is the only thing that truly belongs to you. Pain is just information. Fear is just a story you tell yourself. Death is coming for everyone. The only question is whether you'll meet it with dignity. Most Roman women learned to embroider and manage households. Porcia learned to endure, to reason, to face reality without flinching. She needed every bit of that training for what was coming. Porcia's first husband died young. At 28, she was a widow with a young son. In Rome, that meant she was expected to remarry quickly, preferably to whoever her family picked. But Porcia didn't do what was expected. She fell in love with Marcus Brutus. And here's the complicated part. Brutus was married to someone else, someone well-connected, someone it would be politically stupid to divorce. Brutus divorced her anyway. Why? Because Porcia was different from every other woman he'd ever met. She didn't flirt, didn't manipulate, didn't play games. She spoke plainly, argued philosophy, challenged him intellectually. She treated him like an equal, and he loved her for it. They married in 45 BC. For one brief year, they were happy. They'd survived the civil war between Caesar and Pompey. Caesar had won, but he'd shown mercy to Brutus. Life was settling down. Rome was at peace. Then the secret meetings started. Brutus would leave at odd hours, come home tense and distracted. When Porcia asked what was wrong, he'd say, "Nothing." When she pressed, he'd say, "Don't worry about it." When she insisted, he'd say, "This isn't women's business." That last one was a mistake. Here's what Portia knew. Her husband was planning something dangerous, something that involved Cassius, Decimus, and a dozen other senators, something they only discussed in whispers. Here's what she suspected. They were planning to kill Julius Caesar. And here's what drove her crazy. Brutus wouldn't tell her, wouldn't trust her, treated her like a child who needed protection from scary adult conversations. For weeks, she tried to get him to talk. She tried patience. She tried logic. She tried emotional appeals. Nothing worked. "It's not that I don't trust you," Brutus would say. "It's that I love you. I don't want to put you in danger." "I'm already in danger," Porcia would respond. "If you're caught and executed, what do you think happens to me?" "That's different." "How?" "Because you won't be guilty of anything. I'm your wife. If you fall, I fall. The only difference is you're treating me like I'm not strong enough to stand with you." Brutus would just shake his head and leave for another meeting. If you're enjoying this story and want more like it, hit that subscribe button. We tell stories about real people who faced impossible choices and somehow found the strength to handle them. No fluff, just ancient wisdom that still hits hard today. Now let's get back to Portia. The night Portia cut herself, she'd reached her breaking point. She'd spent months proving she could be trusted. She'd kept every secret Brutus had ever told her. She'd given him advice that had saved him politically. She'd stood by him when everyone else thought he was an idiot for forgiving Caesar. And still, he wouldn't let her in. The Stoics taught that you can't control other people's opinions or choices. You can only control your own actions and responses. But they also taught that sometimes you need to demonstrate your character in ways that can't be ignored. Portia had tried words. Words hadn't worked, so she tried blood. The wound was deep, not life-threatening if treated, but serious, painful, the kind of injury that would make a warrior proud. She bandaged it roughly and went to bed. The pain kept her awake, but she didn't take anything for it. Pain was information. It was telling her she was strong enough to do what needed to be done. When Brutus came home near dawn, he found her in their bedroom, dress stained with blood, face pale but composed. "What happened?" he demanded, rushing to her side. "I cut myself." "How? Where?" She showed him the wound on her thigh. His face went white. "This needs a physician. It needs nothing," Portia said calmly. "I did it on purpose." Silence. Brutus stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "Why would you do this?" And here's where Portia delivered one of history's most powerful speeches. Ancient historians recorded different versions, but they all capture the same devastating logic. "You think I'm weak," Portia said. "You think because I'm a woman, I can't be trusted with dangerous knowledge. You think I'll panic or gossip or break under pressure. That's not, let me finish. You married me knowing I was Cato's daughter. You knew what that meant. You knew I was raised on Stoic principles. You knew I'd been taught to face death without fear, pain without complaint, and hardship without breaking." She gestured to her wounded leg. "This is my proof. I just stabbed myself, not by accident, not in madness, but deliberately, to show you I can endure pain without crying out. If I can do this to myself in private, what makes you think I'd betray you under any pressure?" Brutus tried to interrupt, but Portia wasn't done. I know you're planning something. I know it's dangerous. I know it involves Caesar. And I know you're keeping me in the dark because you think you're protecting me. I am protecting you. No, you're insulting me. You're saying my father's teachings meant nothing. You're saying being a woman erases everything I am. You're saying I'm weaker than I've proven myself to be. She stood up, ignoring the pain shooting through her leg. I am Cato's daughter. I am your wife. I am a Stoic. I can keep secrets. I can endure torture. I can face death. But what I cannot do, what I will not do, is sit quietly while my husband treats me like a decoration instead of a partner. If you're planning to kill Caesar, tell me. If you're planning to die trying, tell me. If you're planning to change Rome's destiny, tell me. I won't stop you. I won't betray you. I'll stand with you or fall with you. But do not dare ask me to sit in ignorance while you risk everything. The room was completely silent except for the sound of Brutus's breathing. You cut yourself, he finally said, his voice barely a whisper, to prove you could keep a secret? I cut myself to prove I'm stronger than you think I am. Now tell me, are you planning to kill Julius Caesar? Brutus broke. He told her everything. The conspiracy had been growing for months. Dozens of senators were involved. They'd recruited people from every faction, every political group. The plan was simple. Assassinate Caesar during a Senate meeting. Make it public. Make it clear this wasn't a coup, but a restoration of the Republic. They believed they were saving Rome from tyranny. Caesar had accumulated too much power. He was becoming a king in everything but name. Someone had to stop him before the Republic died completely. The date was set. March 15th, the Ides of March, just days away. We're all going to die, Brutus said quietly. Even if we succeed, Caesar's supporters will hunt us down. This isn't a plan for survival. This is a plan for principle. I know, Porcia said. You still want to know? I need to know, not because I'm curious, because if you're going to die for your principles, I need to know what I'm living for afterward. That's the thing about Stoicism that people misunderstand. It's not about being emotionless or not caring. It's about choosing what you care about, then committing completely. Porcia cared about truth, about integrity, about standing with the people you love even when, especially when, everything is falling apart. She bandaged her wound properly. She listened to every detail of the conspiracy, and she became the only woman in Rome who knew that the most powerful man in the world had less than a week to live. History records what happened on March 15, 44 BC. Caesar went to the Senate. The conspirators surrounded him. 23 knife wounds. He bled out at the base of Pompey's statue. But history doesn't record what that day was like for Porcia. She woke up knowing her husband was about to commit murder. She helped him dress. She watched him practice the calm, normal expression he'd need to avoid suspicion. She knew that in a few hours, either he'd be dead or Rome would explode into chaos. She couldn't control what would happen. She could only control her response. Ancient sources say she spent the morning pacing. Her servants thought she was sick. She kept sending messengers to find out news, then collapsing when they returned without information. This wasn't stoic calm. This was human terror, barely held in check. And here's the thing. That's okay. The Stoics never said you won't feel fear or anxiety. They said you shouldn't let those feelings control your actions. Porcia was terrified, but she didn't try to stop Brutus. She didn't betray the conspiracy. She didn't fall apart. She endured. When the news finally came, Caesar was dead. The conspirators were safe. Rome was in shock. Porcia didn't celebrate. She knew this wasn't an ending, it was a beginning, and not a good one. The conspirators thought killing Caesar would restore the Republic. They were wrong. Within days, Mark Antony turned public opinion against them. The people of Rome didn't see liberators. They saw murderers who'd killed a man who'd given them land, money, and victories. The conspirators fled. Brutus and Cassius left Rome, eventually ending up in Greece with an army. They were preparing for civil war. And Porcia? She was left behind in Rome, alone, surrounded by people who wanted her husband dead. She couldn't join Brutus. Women didn't go on military campaigns. She couldn't publicly support him without making herself a target. She couldn't speak freely without endangering the few allies they had left. All she could do was wait and hope, and try not to think about the fact that her husband was probably going to die fighting Antony and Octavian's armies. This is where Stoicism becomes less about dramatic gestures and more about everyday survival. How do you get through each day when everything you love is falling apart? How do you stay sane when you can't control anything that matters? The Stoics had an answer. Focus on this moment, this hour, this breath. You can't control tomorrow. You can control right now. Porcia tried, but the weight was crushing. Drop a comment below. Where in the world are you watching from? And have you ever had to stay strong while everything fell apart around you? Let's build a community of people who understand what real strength looks like. Brutus wrote to Porcia when he could. The letters that survived are heartbreaking. He praised her courage. He said she was braver than any of his soldiers. He said remembering her strength kept him going when everything seemed hopeless. But he also knew he was never coming home. The Battle of Philippi was coming. Brutus and Cassius against Antony and Octavian. It was going to be decisive. Someone would win. Someone would die. Porcia read those letters and knew she was reading goodbye. Here's where the historical accounts get fuzzy and contradictory. Different ancient historians tell different versions of what happened next. But they all agree on one thing. Porcia died, and it wasn't peaceful. Some sources say she heard that Brutus lost the battle and killed herself immediately. Others say she lived a bit longer in increasing despair. The most dramatic account, and the one that stuck in Roman imagination, comes from Cassius Dio and is referenced by Plutarch. It says Porcia tried to kill herself but was stopped by her family. They took away all weapons and sharp objects. They watched her constantly, so she found another way. She waited until her guards weren't looking. Then she grabbed burning coals from a brazier and swallowed them. The fire burned her throat and stomach. She died in agony. Whether this version is literally true doesn't matter as much as what it tells us. Porcia's death was as defiant as her life. Even at the end, she found a way to control the one thing she still could, the manner of her death. She was approximately 29 years old. Let's talk about the stabbing again, because there's something modern people miss about this story. When Porcia cut herself, she wasn't being crazy or self-destructive. She was demonstrating a fundamental Stoic principle. Pain is just sensation. It doesn't break you unless you let it. We live in a world that's terrified of discomfort. We avoid hard conversations. We quit when things get difficult. We medicate every unpleasant feeling. Porcia lived in a world where pain was just part of life. You endured it, you moved through it, you proved your character by how you handled it. Now, I'm not saying you should stab yourself. Please don't stab yourself. That would be stupid and I'd feel terrible. But ask yourself, What pain are you avoiding that you actually need to face? What difficult conversation are you putting off? What hard truth are you not dealing with? Porcia's wound healed. The truth it revealed changed everything. Here's the deeper point. Porcia didn't cut herself because she was desperate for attention. She did it because words weren't working. Sometimes people won't believe you're strong until you prove it in ways they can't deny. This happens all the time in modern life. You tell your boss you can handle bigger responsibilities, they ignore you. You tell your partner you're serious about something, they brush it off. You tell your family you've changed, they treat you like you're still the person you were 5 years ago. Words fail. At some point, you have to demonstrate through action, not through violence or drama, but through consistent behavior that can't be ignored. Porcia spent months asking Brutus to trust her. When that didn't work, she showed him, physically, undeniably, that she could endure what he thought she couldn't. It worked. Not because the pain itself mattered, but because it proved she was willing to put action behind her words. What are you saying with words that you need to start proving with actions? The saddest part of Porcia's story is that she fought so hard to be included in Brutus's decisions, and it still ended in tragedy. She got what she wanted: full knowledge, full partnership, full trust, and it still didn't save them. Knowing the conspiracy didn't prevent Caesar's assassination from backfiring. Being trusted didn't keep Brutus alive. Standing together didn't change the outcome, so was it worth it? The Stoics would say yes, absolutely yes. Because the outcome was never the point. The process was the point. The partnership was the point. The integrity was the point. Porcia didn't demand to know the conspiracy because she thought she could fix it. She demanded to know because being shut out of her husband's life was killing their marriage. She chose to face the truth, even though the truth was terrifying. She chose to stand with Brutus, even though it meant standing in danger. She chose partnership over safety. That's not a failure. That's a choice to live fully, even when the world is ending. How many relationships die because one person decides to protect the other by keeping secrets? How many partnerships crumble because someone decides their partner can't handle the truth? Porcia proved something important. Being protected from reality isn't love. It's isolation. Real love means trusting your partner with the hard stuff, the scary stuff, the dangerous stuff. Real partnership means facing the darkness together instead of one person pretending it doesn't exist. Let's address the elephant in the room. Porcia's whole struggle existed because she was a woman. If she'd been Brutus's brother instead of his wife, he would have told her about the conspiracy immediately. No one would have questioned whether a male relative could handle dangerous information. Porcia had to literally wound herself to prove she deserved the same trust automatically given to men. That's messed up, and it's still happening. Women today still have to prove their competence more than men do. Still have to work twice as hard for the same respect. Still get excluded from important conversations because someone decided they wouldn't understand or don't need to worry about it. Porcia's story is ancient, but the pattern is eternal. People with power deciding who deserves trust based on categories instead of character. The Stoic response? You can't control other people's prejudices. You can only control how you respond. Porcia didn't waste energy complaining about unfairness. She demonstrated undeniably that the prejudice was wrong. She forced Brutus to see her as she actually was, not as Roman society said women should be. That's the model. Don't argue about what you deserve. Prove what you're capable of. Make your competence impossible to ignore, not because you should have to, but because that's what works. Here's what haunts me about Porcia's story. She got everything she fought for. Brutus trusted her. She knew the truth. She was a full partner in his decisions. And then he left. And then he died. And then she was alone with that knowledge, unable to do anything with it except grieve. Was it worth it? I think Porcia would say yes, because the alternative, living in ignorant safety while her husband died for principles she wasn't allowed to share, would have been worse. The Stoics believed that living with integrity matters more than living comfortably, that being true to yourself matters more than being safe, that dying for something real matters more than living for nothing. Porcia lived that philosophy completely. She demanded truth even when it hurt. She stood with her principles even when it cost her everything. She faced death on her own terms instead of letting fear choose for her. She was 29 when she died. She'd been married to Brutus for less than 2 years. She spent most of that time fighting to be seen as an equal, and she only won that fight right before everything collapsed. That's not a happy ending, but it's a real one. If Porcia could speak to you right now across 2,000 years, what would she say? I think she'd say this: stop waiting for permission to be strong. Stop asking people to trust you. Prove you're trustworthy and let them catch up. Stop accepting comfort when what you need is truth. Demand honesty from the people you love, even when honesty is hard. Stop letting fear of pain keep you from doing what needs to be done. Pain passes. Regret lasts forever. Stop letting other people's small expectations define your life. You're capable of more than anyone thinks, including yourself. And most importantly, when everything falls apart, you get to choose how you face it. That choice is the only thing that's truly yours. Make it count. Before you go, do me a favor. Subscribe to this channel if Porcia's story moved you. We're building something here, a place where ancient wisdom meets modern struggle, where we learn from people who faced impossible situations and somehow found the strength to handle them. And comment below, what's one thing you've been too afraid to demand from someone you love? What truth have you been avoiding? What pain have you been running from? Let's be honest with each other. Porcia would have wanted that. Here's the strange thing about Porcia Cato. She's barely remembered today. Most people know about Caesar's assassination. Some know about Brutus. Almost nobody knows about Porcia. But the Romans remembered. For centuries, she was held up as the model of female Stoic virtue. Writers told her story. Philosophers debated her choices. Women invoked her name when demanding to be taken seriously. She proved that strength isn't about gender, that courage isn't about muscles, that Stoic principles work the same whether you're a senator or a senator's wife. She proved that you can be feminine and fierce, loving and uncompromising, emotional and rational, all at the same time. And she proved that sometimes the only way to get people to see who you really are is to show them something they can't unsee. 2,000 years later, we're still talking about the night she picked up that dagger, still asking ourselves if we'd have the courage to do what she did, still wondering if we're brave enough to demand the truth even when the truth might destroy us. The answer, of course, is that we won't know until we're tested. None of us know how strong we are until strength is our only option. But Porcia's story suggests something important. We're stronger than we think, braver than we imagine, capable of more than anyone expects. We just have to be willing to prove it. Stay strong, Stay honest. And remember, the only person who can decide your worth is you. Now go live like you know it.